Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the fifth edition of Financial Tangent Podcast. I can't believe it's already, this is what, a fifth?
Yep.
Fifth edition.
I know, it's wild.
Yeah. Everybody says we're getting better. We're getting more comfortable in front of the microphone. Our 11 subscribers. Shout out to my mom, my 11th subscriber.
Woohoo!
Absolutely. So, once again, everybody, my name's Rich. We have Claudia and Ben with us, and we talk about all things financial and usually go off on tangents. So, do a quick recap of our last episode. Last week, we discussed why it's important to get out of debt and stay out of debt. And this week, we'll be discussing some of our favorite financial books. So before we get started, I got a couple of administration things. First of all, I'd like to start out with a joke, a financial joke. Did you hear about the wife helping her husband become a millionaire after they got married? Do you know what the husband was before he got married? A millionaire. You get it?
I don't get it, actually.
All right, let me repeat the joke again. Did you hear about the wife helping her husband
I get
become a millionaire after they got married? What was a husband before he got married?
Okay, a millionaire.
A billionaire.
Oh, billionaire. Oh, I heard millionaire the first time.
Sorry, I goofed that up.
Okay.
Alrighty, hey, folks, it's a uncut version here.
That's a good one. We got to come up with more of those.
That's right. And before we dive into things, just remember www.integritytrailers.com. It's not just our name, it's our reputation. Shout out to Bill, friend of the podcast. All righty. So
Very
what
nice.
books
Very
can
nice.
our
You will
viewers...
appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. So what books can our viewers turn to for help? I think we'd like to start off with, Chloe, your favorite is The Total Money Makeover. Did you want to talk about that a little?
Yeah. So I liked this book because I think it's really good for people who are just kind of starting out in their financial journey. This is by Dave Ramsey, the godfather of, or you could say the grandfather of personal finance, but he brings you through the different steps that you can take throughout your financial journey. So the first one would be getting up an emergency fund. He talks to you how to get out of debt, how to invest, all that good stuff, how to build wealth. And what I like about it is that it's very easy to read. There's hardly any technical or financial jargon. He talks about his debt snowball method and breaks down money myths that you may have heard, maybe something about car loans or credit cards, etc. And it's a really easy read, so it's good for any age. The other thing that I like is that he includes worksheets in the back of the book to help with organizing your finances, such as a spending plan, like I said earlier, debt snowball, so there's a worksheet for that, how to plan if you have an irregular income, and how to break down your savings a little bit. And then the last thing I like about this book too, is money is really hardly just a numbers thing. There's a mental side to it as well. And he has a lot of anecdotes, a lot of stories of people who have written about their financial journey. And it's very powerful, the stories that people have said. And so I think it helps with motivation in that regard. That's why I like that book.
Yeah, I can count on Dave Ramsey. I've been listening to Dave Ramsey since the 90s, back when he was on AM radio, and he was basically this guy from down south that really brought personal finance into the mainstream. In radio, he was on, a lot of he was on right before Rush Limbaugh, on that time slot, and he really sort of brought out, you had your financial advisor gurus out there and stuff, but he was the first one that really went mainstream with
made it easy for people to understand, I think.
Yeah.
Started talking about it like, no, this is stupid. Don't, just do it this way, or
And
in
I
his
think,
Dave Ramsey way of saying things.
Yeah. And he was,
and I think too, right? Like his show that he's done now recently, listening to other people's perspectives and situations can kind of help you compare yourself to them, but also learn from them. I think is kind of the next kind of evolution of that show.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. I love listening to the callers that chime in, hearing what their situation is. And
In my opinion, he's gotten a little, and I struggle saying this, but he's gotten grouchy in the last recent years. His vintage stuff was great. He was this fun Southern guy that he was a little edgy, and he just brought out a lot of concepts that weren't cool, that weren't mainstream, and he just had a way of making those concepts sort of a household name of, no, that really isn't good. Concepts like that. And, so I've really enjoyed that part about him. Back in the 90s, the 2000s, he had a lot of good wisdom back then, but a lot of character, I think, for the whole subject matter.
yeah, he's a very, how do I say this? Very much like get a grip and just take care of it.
Right.
Take care of things. So
He's kind of the Gordon Ramsay of your wallet.
yeah, that's a good
a great way I can explain it. He'll tell you what you need to hear, whether or not you like it.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
But yeah, I would say, I think that Dave Ramsey's podcast is great. I listen to just here and there all these different reels on Instagram or Facebook as I'm checking it. The algorithm totally knows how to capture my attention. So every time I go on those, I'm like totally just like distracted, but in a good way, I guess. I guess that's on the good side of social media. But what books do you guys like, Chloe and Rich, that you guys have really resonated with, and what, like, what has spoken to you as you've read books about personal finance? I mean, I've only read two. I'm not an expert or anything like that, and I'll get into those later. But what I want to hear from you guys.
Well, I recently just finished up reading The Wolf of Investing, and that's by Jordan Belfort. He was a guy that, the movie was made about him. If I'm correct, he wrote the book, The Wolf of Wall Street as well, and he was the stockbroker that was sent to prison, and the movie was about his life and his chain of events that eventually led to his downfall. So he wrote an investing book, and I really highly recommend his book, The Wolf of Investing, with a few caveats. Jordan's edgy. His language is atrocious. His analogies are crude. There's a lot of junior high. I don't know, you read some of it. You started to read it, right, Clay?
Well, I did start. It is kind of junior high, but I thought I read something about the author's note in the back that said something like he made it that way intentionally so that it would be easier for people to kind of understand and say.
It's not dry, that's for sure.
yeah, it is not dry. So it's not just a boring financial book.
Right. So I can only laugh because you have to read it to understand his style, his prose, and he starts out and he does a really good job of giving you a history of the stock market, the history of the investment profession. And basically his whole gist of the book is that investment, his theory, and I agree with this, and is that investment professionals, your stockbrokers, your mutual fund managers, your hedge fund managers, they're not going to beat the S&P 500 over the long term. And you're far better off in the long term just investing your money in a nice low cost S&P 500 mutual fund.
Can
And
you explain, or maybe he explains that and maybe you would spoil the book, but is there a reason why they can't beat the S&P 500?
just the average mutual fund manager just can't beat the average.
Okay. It's just difficult, I guess.
Yeah, right. You know, the S&P 500 is the top 500 companies in the stock market, and you're just not going to beat the performance of that aggregate, the aggregation of 500 companies,
That's really
aggregated into a mutual fund. So, yeah, and there was a guy by the name of John Bogle that came along in the 90s, and he was the first guy that, much to the absolute anger and anger of the investment professionals, that he came across, the first guy that come across that created the low cost S&P 500 mutual fund that the average person could invest in and get a great, a very good return over long term that the average stockbroker can't beat, or fund manager, and charging all the exorbitant management fees and all that for people to invest in their funds when they could just go to the S&P 500 and invest in a low cost.
And that's really smart too. Now that I think about it, it's smart because it's already diversified.
Yes, right.
So
Absolutely.
you don't have to think about, I guess, all of the heartaches that come with figuring out investing. It's basically done for you in that sense.
I have here, sorry, this is completely off script, but I have here in my hand, let me get this to zoom in. This is a 50 pennies. And this is a roll of 50 pennies. Here, I'm going to open it up and show everybody. This is diversification, as far as I'm concerned, right? And this is, so maybe this help visualize it. You take okay, so this is 50 pennies in my hand. You just invest in the S&P 500. That's 10 more of these rolls.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So that's 10 more handfuls of penny rolls that you're investing in 500, so you visualize it that way. You've got a lot of diversification. Yeah. And I was a little nervous, being a little later in life and the retirement portfolio was looking really good. I'm like, okay, maybe in an S&P 500 is a diverse enough. But, you start thinking along the lines of 500 pennies. That's a lot of 500 companies.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then one of the things that struck with me was that everybody's familiar with Warren Buffett. He's been a very successful investor out of Iowa for decades. He made a famous bet against a gentleman called Ted Seides, and the Warren Buffett made a bold wager with the hedge fund manager Ted Seides of Protégé Partners. The bet was simple. Buffett believed that a low-cost S&P 500 index fund would outperform a group of Protégé's hedge funds over the course of 10 years. And guess what? Buffett emerged victorious. His S&P 500 fund achieved an impressive 7.1% annual gain, while the basket of funds selected by Protégé Partners managed only a 2.1% increase.
Wow.
So they made a bet, and I think $1 million went to charity.
Gotcha.
And Warren Buffett, it was like a children's, like an orphanage type of a situation that money got invested. So anyway,
that's pretty neat.
Yeah. You can open that, and bet anybody in the world $1 million to go to charity if their hedge fund or their fund could beat the S&P 500 over a course of 10 years. And so this one person picked them up out at this Ted Seides and of his Protégé hedge fund portfolio, And, Ted got his butt handed to him, basically. So, and the last thing on this book I wanted to talk about, I'm not an expert, I'm still learning this. And one of the things that Jordan opened me up to was modern portfolio theory. And the gist of modern portfolio theory, or MPT, is to diversify your investing into different asset classes. So Jordan recommends offsetting your S&P 500 fund with a low-cost bond fund. And so that'll help smooth out some of the dips in the S&P 500 when there's market downturns. And so that you're down, because you're basically the stock market. When the stock market goes down, bond funds tend to go up a little bit. And they're sort of inversely related to each other. And so you're offsetting some of that with on the peaks and valleys of the S&P 500. But I want to get into that more later in a different episode rather than butchering that concept. I want to learn some more about that. So
Yeah. It's interesting because when I think of the S&P 500, I don't think of that. I think of it as a really safe investment option, but it's not the first thing that comes to mind as something that outperforms other stocks.
Right. Yeah.
Like it's always kind of in the middle of the road. Like I've seen stuff that have a higher 10-year return, but that's interesting that he says it has the highest long-term rate of return. So that's interesting.
It's not a sports car that you would bring home from the dealership. So Ben, you recently read The Millionaire Next Door, and also one of your favorite books is Rich Dad Poor Dad. Did you want to talk about those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've read, there's two of them, The Millionaire Next Door, and then there's another one called The Next Millionaire Next Door. So that's kind of a series. It's by Thomas J. Stanley and Sarah Stanley. This is what it looks like.
That's a classic.
And my dad actually got me into this series, and really, I've got a couple of quotes, I guess, from this. Really, what this book dissects is a lot of the psychologies in American socioeconomics, and also purchasing decisions and behaviors, especially that we see emerging more so in, honestly, the 1980s through today, that we didn't really see as a society and as a country before. Things like financed automobiles, things like expensive watches, kind of just your kind of tacky / stereotypical signs of wealth. It really does a nice job dissecting that. And in the book, there's all different kinds of things. So it talks about, so here, I'll just read from the list of contents.
Yes.
Ignoring the myths, freedom to consume, strengths for building wealth, getting to work, investing resources, and those are kind of some of the seven big chapters. So honestly, there's, one of these myths is, and it's myth number 6 in his book. This is on page 47. It reads, myth number 6, I cannot get ahead on my own. This is something that society predominantly accepts as a truth, that that you are born on third base and you think you hit a triple. And really, honestly, there's a lot to that analogy. But it says, if you can produce something or a service of value, either in an employment setting or in self-employment, you have the opportunity to prosper in America. So what that statement says is ultimately you need to look at where and how you are adding value and analyze that, because it is not just, it's not just what you do, but it's how you add value. And if you can leverage that skill, talent, or ability either at a company or in your own company. And many do that. And it's definitely something that is an opportunity. I think when you hear people talk about, land of the opportunity, it says the freedom continues to attract people to all nations of our shores. Approximately 13% of our 311 million citizens share our first generation Americans. So 13%, that's something that is intriguing to me, because many come to our country and start their own business or supply to our own country. I work in supply chain, so I actually interface with I've interfaced with people in the Netherlands. I've interfaced recently with people in Latin America. So it really does, it really does exemplify that there are many opportunities here to add value. And if you can do that, you'll do quite well.
I think people, that's a really good point, Ben. I think
What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, that society will pay very well if you can provide something, a good or service that adds value to people, adds value to our lives. Absolutely. Look how much money we spend on these things.
Right, exactly. And so my next kind of quote that I want to talk about, it's on page 61, and it's in the chapter Influences on Wealth, and it says, and this is kind of a bulleted list, and it says at the header, it says obtaining outcomes like those in John's family, who is basically John is somebody in this book that they are talking about how he saved for his kids college, and how he got started. But it says obtaining outcomes like those in John's family is a combination of nature and nurture, as we discussed earlier. But the nurture side is one we can control today. Kind of similar to the psychology that Chloe was talking about earlier about Dave Ramsey, and how it's very behavioral, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how willing are parents today to do the following in order to have a chance for achieving outcomes John and his siblings, as well as John and his children have? Encouraging your child to save his or her own money, encouraging or requiring your children to work, having your children pay for their own electronics, latest smartphones included, teaching responsibility with consumer goods and respect for the toys they have, saving your child's college education funds, both parent and child. And so I think that there's a vast range in this list, but something as simple as even a very measly allowance to maybe your children, or as they grow up, is a good option to teach them. I don't know if anybody listening to this has kids, but when that time comes in your life, if you don't have kids, and you're younger listening to this, that's a great opportunity, because it kind of teaches them the opportunity cost. And later in the book, in this section in the book, it says training for economic success. Financially successful people share many similar characteristics, as we'll discuss more in depth later in chapter 5. But they also have similar early experiences. They often come from stable family backgrounds. They are well-disciplined, and they are goal-oriented. So I don't necessarily know if I agree with the statement that all come from close family backgrounds, because not everybody is close with their family, but you can still, and your family, and I think maybe in this context, they could use it relatively, you know what I mean? So it could be like your kind of adopted family or your friends, you know what I mean? Those that you're close with, if they'll hold you accountable. Ultimately, this book is just telling us that you need to be held accountable. So then that way you can be well-disciplined and be goal-oriented. So, find that accountability. It could be an Excel spreadsheet that will hold you accountable. It could be Rocket Money. It could be, Chloe, what's the app that you're using?
EveryDollar.
EveryDollar. That's something that will hold you accountable. And ultimately, that's what these apps are doing, and they're putting them right on our phones, which is a good and a bad thing, right? But so that's The Millionaire Next Door, and The Next Millionaire Next Door. I liked The Millionaire Next Door. For me, it was kind of your bread and butter getting started, but the next Millionaire Next Door really takes it to the next level with a lot of psychology. My Millionaire Next Door, I loaned out to a friend, so that's not with me right now.
That's
But
a
the next
good
book I want to talk about.
Well, before you move on to the Rich Dad Poor Dad, Ben, I just wanted to say that The Millionaire Next Door is a really good book because he drives home the point, and I don't think most people don't realize this, is that your average millionaire lives in just the standard middle class neighborhood. They're not the flashy people in the huge homes with the fancy cars. They're just normal people that live frugal lives and saved and invested, and that's the.
Yeah, Dad, it's interesting you brought that up. Slightly off topic, but I promise we'll get us back on topic. Dave Ramsey they did at Ramsey Solutions the largest study of millionaires, and they found that the top 5 careers that millionaires have are engineer, teacher, lawyer, I think computer science, and then I forget the other one, but ordinary jobs.
Yeah,
nothing.
Right.
Doctor did not make the list, which was crazy.
Auctioneer is a real high one as well.
Well, and Chloe, when you say doctor did not make the list, this book will explain why or how. Yeah, it talks about being balance sheet rich versus being, wallet rich. You know what I mean? There's a lot moving in and out of your wallet, but there's nothing on your balance sheet.
Well, Ben, we can go back to Ben later. We should probably move on to what would you had a section in here, Chloe, about what would you do?
Yeah, we can do this, and then Ben can wrap us up with the Rich Dad Poor Dad book.
Absolutely.
But we wanted to start this segment, What Would You Do? Financial Tangent Edition. And for those of you who don't know, What Would You Do is a TV show where they take actors out in public and they act about certain, I would say, high stress situations, serious situations, and they film people in public and just film them and ask, what would you do? So, Financial Tangent Edition, here we go. This is by Timmy Hoops 12. Hi, I have collections nearing 20,000 from my institution, but wanted to go back and finish my last 2 semesters. I am not eligible for government-based loans since it's been a couple years. Would it be wise to take a personal loan out for this expense and finish college since I'm so close, or pay it down as I go? Thank you in advance.
I'm sorry, what did you say Timmy Hoops' age was?
What's that?
What did you say Timmy Hoops' age was?
It's Timmy Hoops 12.
He's 12.
That's the username.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, excellent. I thought that was his age. All right, my bad. I'm sorry.
No, I just want to give proper credit.
So he's in college.
Yes.
How much does he owe?
Collections nearing 20,000.
And how much longer does he have to finish college?
2 semesters.
Wrap it up, right? Finish it up.
Well, he's asking, does he take out a personal loan for the last 2 semesters, or the last part of the question isn't clear, but I'm interpolating that he probably means pay it down as he goes. And I would say if it's 2 semesters, gosh, I would almost argue if you didn't want to get like a second job or something and pay it down as you go, what's the harm in waiting a year and just like piling up cash to pay for it and then finishing it?
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. That's a good Dave Ramsey answer, Chloe.
Or if you're antsy to get it done, do it, but then maybe do a side hustle, work part-time. Colleges do employ a lot of their students on campus, so those jobs are pretty easy to find.
You bring up a good point, because if he were to just take out more debt to wrap up that final year, he's walking out of there 30,000 instead of 20,000 in debt. Yeah, that's a good point. I like what you're going there with that. Or stretch it out a little bit until like a year and a half, 2 years to finish up that final year. And if he's working and stuff and hustling and delivering pizzas and stuff, he could graduate debt free.
And the other thing too is he could try to find something part-time in or related to the degree that he's.
No, sure, absolutely.
And so because he's only got 2 more semesters, he might actually get paid more doing that because he's so close to being done.
Sure.
Like he probably will get higher than, I guess it depends on what he goes into, but definitely higher than minimum wage, maybe higher than $15 an hour.
Right.
Just something to consider.
Yeah, definitely. You have another one?
I do. This one's a little bit longer, so I was saving it for the end, but if Ben had wanted to talk about his other book, if he was ready for that.
Got a little Robert Kiyosaki in you, Ben?
Yeah. So that's kind of my next book. And it's called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert T. Kiyosaki. This is what it looks like. Being the very financially responsible person that I am, I skimped out and bought the paperback copy this time around.
The font's too small for me on those.
For a whopping, this book is a whopping $9 whole, and it will have an ROI of 120 something percent at least.
Wow.
I guarantee it for all that it's taught me. Yeah. It's a great book. It kind of delves more into the entrepreneurship and self-employment piece than it does maybe the, American economics and American psychology and socioeconomics and culture like these ones will, from the Stanleys. This is a great book. Easy read. It'll teach you a lot. It does a really nice job. It's got some good visuals. It also talks about your balance sheet, so it'll have your assets and liabilities, your income and expenses. It kind of follows suit with Millionaire Next Door, looking at your life as a business. What's going in, what's going out, what are you retaining, what are you growing? And so I like it. It's a very easy read. It kind of teaches you about, something interesting that this one really talks about is paying yourself first, which a lot of people don't really think about. So what it kind of teaches you, and this is kind of something that I do, is it says, although I pay my bills last, I am financially astute enough to not get into a tough financial situation. So it says, I don't like consumer debt. I actually have liabilities that are higher than 99% of the population, but I don't pay for them. Other people pay for my liabilities. They're called tenants. So this one really uses real estate, right? And, real estate and, kind of just, investment property as an example for self-employment, right? It takes a lot of capital to get started with that, though. You got to put a down payment, and you got to make sure that you have the place occupied, and it might not always be occupied. You might have to replace a refrigerator, stove, oven, washer, dryer, hot water heater, you name it, right? So, all these videos and stuff that you see online about real estate investing, yes, they're accurate to a certain degree, but there is something, there is a caveat to a lot of that. There's an asterisk. And kind of like we talked about earlier, you're going to hear about everybody's winners, but you're not going to hear about everybody's losers, especially in the stock market or in their life, their financial decisions, right? So just keep that in mind. But I like it. This book kind of talks about paying yourself first when you receive your payroll from work. Pay yourself first means, put X amount right away. Put it aside, put it in a separate account, transfer it to a different sub account in your bank, whatever, you name it, right? Do that, right? Or if it is you're paying off a debt, then pay yourself first by paying off that debt. I view paying off your debts as paying yourself, because being debt free is an investment in yourself. But it kind of squirrels away the money so that you don't spend it and look at your account and go, oh, I have, X amount of money and I can do this and that and whatever else. Let's do it. But paying yourself first is ultimately, I think, at the end of the day, the best thing, because it keeps you honest. Your same committed path, of say you're saving $500 per month, right? Say you want to buy a car, you want to try to pay all cash, you want to, do that and save for a few years. Pay yourself $500 a month first. Say, for example, your payroll comes in at, I don't know, say it's 900 a week or something like that, or say it's $2,000 a week. You're at least putting away $500 regardless, and then all the others is left for your expenses, be it rent, mortgage payment, whatever else. You know, and then it kind of prohibits you from going out and spending beyond.
Yeah, I like that. I guess the example I think of is paying yourself first by like automatically taking out, I don't know, however much, 10, 15% and putting it into like a 401k that your company offers. Like that's just automatic. You don't even have to think about that, which is kind of nice. So I guess that would be an example too that I thought.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's a good book. That's another mindset shifting book that really, I think what he tries to do is shift you away from being an employee to being one of like more of a, I think what you said too, Ben, just treating your career, your life as a business and looking for ways that you can generate income outside of a, employee type of situation.
Yeah.
So,
That's a book it's been on my list for many years now. So I feel more convinced than ever to read that.
I can loan you them.
Oh, perfect. So I have one more example of a what would you do financial tangent edition.
Yeah, bring it on.
Okay, it's a little bit longer, but I'll try to get through it as quick as I can. Okay. I, 33 female, and my partner, 36 male, have gotten very serious over the last 3 years and decided and would like to buy a home together. We both make six-figure salaries and have very stable incomes. I'm paying almost $2,200 a month in rent alone. Having a mortgage would cost me the same, if not possibly less. My partner does not have nearly as much debt as me, and it's only student loans that is about $5,000. The problem is, when I was younger, I was reckless with my finances. I had to support myself in college, and as a result, racked up $43,000 in debt. I have been working insanely hard to pay it off. I recently obtained a consolidated loan to clear out half and have been using the snowball method to pay off the rest. Over the last 3 months, I have managed to pay off $10,000, but it has not been easy. I'd really like to make this leap and move on with my life. My minimum payments are $1,200 across different cards and the loan. I make enough money to be able to not only pay the minimum, but aggressively throw money at other debts. And so she's asking, should she wait and buy the house or pay off the debt first and then go into home ownership?
I don't think the.
I'll jump in real quick.
Yeah.
If you're making six figures a year and your rent is $22,000,
or 2,200.
I'm sorry, your rent is $2,200 a month. That's going to put you just shy of 30 grand a year. So that would leave you 70, assuming you're making at least 100, right? So six figures.
Mm-hmm.
Put you close to 70. Assume for taxes, so that brings you down to 50. So you're ultimately living on 50 for anything that isn't your rent, right?
Yeah.
If you've got 43 grand, you can pay that off in 2 years. That's wild.
That was exactly my thought, because she says too, over the last 3 months, I've managed to pay off $10,000, but it has not been easy. So I'm thinking, if you just hustle like that for another year, you could be totally debt free. And then even if you do hustle for 2 years, become debt free in a year, and then use that extra year to save up for a down payment, she'll be able to do that. And she's right. It's probably not going to be easy. It's probably going to really suck, actually. But I think the sacrifice would be worth it. Plus, too, if you go into home ownership and maybe you're not quite ready, I feel like there are unexpected expenses when you have a house rather than if you rent or you have an apartment, like you don't really have to pay for if the AC goes out or something. Like that's kind of the
Exactly.
leaser's job. So
Absolutely.
You know, it's an interesting. I mean, you hear all different positions across the board. You know, there was somebody that I was listening to on a recent Dave Ramsey video. He's 28 years old. He's got like $280,000 in the bank, no
Wow.
debt, no liabilities or anything. Single, ready to buy a house, but doesn't know if he should wait until he meets somebody or until like, you know, or if he'll change jobs or if he wants to retire, you know, or whatever. I mean, it's amazing. Or you hear this situation or the other situation. It's just it's just wild.
yeah,
But ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to look at your finances as your tool to afford the life that you want. You can't just look at the numbers and go, "This is going to make me happy." You know, it's important, I think, to look at what do you want to achieve. Do you want to work for yourself? Do you want to work for somebody else? And you know, I think thinking about your finances as your way to navigate and get the life that you want,
right.
huge. What do you guys think? Kind of as we wrap up.
Yeah, so I guess in that way, are you kind of saying like the house won't necessarily make her happy, but it's more so like the goals in mind and getting to those goals? Is that kind of what you were saying?
Yeah, and it could be that like just that sense of security, like I own the house that I'm living in, or it could just be I own the house that I'm living in, I'm paying it off, so then later on in retirement I can travel or I can see my family or you know whatever, or I could retire early, you know what I mean, things like that. That's kind of what I think about.
Gotcha.
I could be missing something, or you guys could be thinking about something entirely different too. But I also think that sense of achievement is something as well.
Yeah.
I didn't consider that.
Gotcha.
My advice going forward is learn to sacrifice today for a better future tomorrow. So, absolutely. Pay your debts off and then let that wealth build over time. You'll have that extra investment. We talked about that a couple episodes ago. That's my advice. So what are we doing next episode, you guys?
Well, I'd love to hear from anybody listening.
Yeah.
We've also got some tricks up our sleeves too. I mean, we could dive into stocks 101, the stock market investing 101. I don't know, Chloe, what do you think?
I like those ideas. Yeah, and we could dive into common money myths too. I mean, whatever is most popular and whatever people want to hear, whatever is most helpful, what is confusing out there that people would like clarification on.
Absolutely.
Cool. Let's do it.
Well, great episode, you guys. This is
yeah, absolutely.
We're doing this every week.
Yeah, absolutely.